All right, it's 8:30. I want to call the joint meeting of the Land, Water, Forest Resources Committee to order. First order of business, Madam Clerk, is roll call.
Bruce Paulson.
Here.
Ron Buckholz.
Here.
Jesse Betcher.
Here.
Mark Helwig.
Here.
Brian Bizinet.
Here.
And Shepherd.
Here. Very good. We have a quorum. Did we comply with the open meetings law?
The meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statute.
Thank you. Pledge of allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Comments? If any member of the public has a comment on something that's not on the agenda, now is your time to speak. Yes, Ms. Zellman.
Linda Zillmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Edgewater property owner. And an item that's not specifically on this agenda, but I am requesting to be put on a future agenda is the Sawyer County effort to codify its ordinances. In 2020, the county entered into a contract with Unicode to do the codification. There's been some work done with them as well as legal counsel to go through working with county clerk and departments to get the old ordinances and codify them. That is really a very serious policy matter because once that codification is updated, it replaces your existing ordinances. Have not seen discussion at a committee level and especially at the zoning committee level. The first draft that I've seen is 345 pages long and about 85% of that is zoning. So in general discussion at a previous zoning committee meeting, the department felt that they did not want the zoning ordinances codified. So a lot of time and effort has been spent to develop the document, but I don't know the involvement, and I do think it requires a review, especially with subsequently adopted ordinances like the decontamination for boat launches, which was adopted subsequent to the draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments on something not on the agenda? All right. Next item is the minutes from the prior meeting. I entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Now, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve, but I want to put on there, after reading this, that there just might be a type error here on meeting date and time. It says Wednesday, February 11th. It should have been today, March 9th. Just make that a note.
Okay. All right. We got a note.
I'll second that with those, with that adjustment, that amendment.
Motion's been made and seconded by Jesse. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, events.
We have none requested this month.
Okay. Sawyer County Treasurer's Department. Anything from the Sawyer County Treasurer on land sales? All right. Record surveyor. Is he online?
No, he's out today.
Okay. All right. Zoning and conservation.
Yeah, we should have final plans for the Upper Bruni River project next month. So we'll be showing those off and looking for approval. Right now, they're in DNR's hands to grant the permit, but then we still want approval from this committee. Once we get approval from this committee, we'll go out and then seek bids, and then we'll bring those bids back to the committee for approval of those bids. So that's that process. We did start the Billy Boy easement process. We were able to get into the right contact with the BIA to secure an easement for the Billy Boy Dam. We have a 25-year easement agreement that is coming to expiration next year. So we wanted to be proactive and make sure that we're getting that updated. Tree sale is still up and running online. I think all but one variety of tree species is still available. So looking forward to the sale here in April. Conservation staff attending, training seminars, updating dam emergency action plans, design works for conservation projects, and installation checks on other occurring projects. The annual Land and Water Conference, which is available to all Land, Water, Forest Resource Committee members, is again held virtually this year. I believe those actually occurred last week. So workflow permits is starting to pick up as spring is right around the corner. And also wanted to mention that last month we talked that Katie Weller's photo for the conservation poster contest. She's I believe a senior. I don't know what grade she is. She's in high school though. So she's in the senior division, either grade 12. So she is a senior. This photo or this poster went to state and actually won state and is now going on to nationals.
Wow.
Good. Want to point it that way from the camera?
Okay. Did you get that in the paper?
No, but I think we will now that it's going to nationals. So
Perfect.
I'll do a little op-ed piece there. So outside of that, that's my conservation update report. If anyone has questions on that, otherwise we'll move on to.
Any questions on the conservation? Okay, good. Why don't you move on then?
Yeah, moving on to B, we have the 2021 wildlife damage claims, and I'll turn it over to, I believe Seth is online. He can kind of go through some of those attachment documents.
Morning, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think.
Seth Zestiger with Wildlife Services. Pretty straightforward. Have the 2021 wildlife damage claims there for your review, and they're all recommended for approval.
Okay. Anybody have any questions of Seth or?
No.
The action needed will be the approval by this committee. It doesn't go to the county board.
It does not.
Okay,
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve as presented.
thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the wildlife damage. Any further questions? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Motion carried. All right. So our county forestry department, motorized, non-motorized trail reports, anybody?
Kathy LaRue with the Alliance. I'm at the tail end of a head cold. It's not COVID, but I didn't want to share today, so. The ice storm has caused a lot of damage to our trails. Operations for grooming have ceased. It's just simply not safe to, we have a lot of overhanging, tree limbs, a lot of cleanup. So at our Alliance meeting next week, I'm sure that's going to be a big part of the discussion, how to, go back in and clean everything up. It's probably going to involve some ATV work. We'll be, I'm sure, talking with forestry because there's going to be a spring closure coming up here. We'd like to be able to get in and, get some of the extensive damage taken care of. Other than that, it's been a tremendously busy snowmobile season. Our counters, we purchased 3 counters that we're still working with trying, maybe you have a better report on that, on what the counter situation has been. Jane, this is Jane from the Alliance.
Yeah, and excuse me, Jane Schrader, and I've been tasked with working with the counters and the system, and like she said, it's more complicated than we thought it would be. But the initial information that we're getting from the counters is not surprising, but it's exciting because we actually see some of the things that we just know come to life on paper. So obviously we know which days are more extensively used for our trails, but the numbers that are coming through with the counters are pretty exciting. There's 2,000 to 3,000 counts within a short time over the weekend, like from a Thursday afternoon to a Saturday afternoon. So we're still working on it, but we are getting some graphs that are coming back to us, and hopefully we'll be able to share more with you in the coming months here. So, and this will carry over into our ATV season as well, which is going to be here before we know it. So that's it for now.
I don't really have anything else to add unless you have questions.
Anybody have questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, go ahead, please, Jesse.
Hey Kathy, with all the trees down and stuff, I imagine there's going to be a lot more snowmobile traffic on the lakes. Do you have a set date when those lake routes and trails are closed, or is it completely weather dependent?
It's weather dependent. Most of the resorts have closed down on the Chippewa Flowage, which is a major destination. I think Deerfoot and Johnson's Resort and maybe one other place is open through next weekend. Everything else is shut down as far as the resorts. So I'm not sure how much more traffic we'll get. The other lakes, it's weather dependent. Once we start getting, a lot more slush on the lakes and, of course, it's a safety issue for removing the lake stakes. So we get out there well before we think we're gonna fall into the drain.
Okay, thank
you.
Any more questions? Jesse, you okay?
Those a thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Thumbs up. Good. Well, thank you. Any questions then? Non-motorized, we have a report for non-motorized. Before we continue with the forestry department, I missed LCO report and the USDA report. You're gonna have just something in writing for the USDA from what I read?
That was a question I should
I
ask.
believe it's coming quarterly from them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, you do.
Is that was a question, we just had a committee meeting last Wednesday.
Yeah.
The question was brought up, do you guys want our CCD to come to these meetings, or do you will accept me as a member still, or that was up to you guys to decide.
Okay.
He never got back to me by this Wednesday, so I just showed up.
Okay, well, yeah, good.
Well, he's part of this committee.
I thought so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's not too much of an inconvenience.
If it's not.
No, it's not, but see, it's according to the statute, he's the one that's supposed to be here. But he can appoint somebody, or you guys can appoint somebody from the county too, I guess.
Okay, so I think the county board already appointed you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we can put up with it.
Yeah, I can come.
All right. Brian, do you have anything on LCO?
Not really. We're just in the planning stages. We're just waiting for a break in the weather, but the last couple of days it's been, we've had a lot of storm damage out here as well from the ice. And so we're trying to get our trails cleaned. Our hatchery sustained some damage that we're cleaning up. Other than that, we're just waiting for springtime so we can, or for it to warm up anyway. So.
Okay. Any questions for Brian, LCO? All right, thank you. All right, Greg, you're up with your county forestry report.
Okay, month of February, we had 10 sales listed as active. Right now, we're kind of winding down the winter harvesting season. The big question now is when road bans are coming on. That pretty much finishes it off for us. On average, it's March 15th, but all weather dependent, so we're getting close to the end. Sale, we're still moving a fair amount of hardwood pulp at this point. That market's still available, so that's a positive. So things are looking good in that realm. Sale value sold and uncut on file right now is just over 4.1 million. Sale revenue for February was just under 100,000. Our year-to-date is at 183,000. Sale revenue billed out for this month is 188,000. Sale inspections are on track for the level of activity. Currently, we're finishing up our timber sale tracks and preparing our timber sale bid prospectus, which typically goes out in the first week of April or so. We have a bid opening sometime in probably the last week of April. Recon acres, we're on track there for our annual goal. The Neighbor Authority, we're still working on our for year 22 contract. We did receive final reimbursements on 2 for year 21 contracts with the state and a partial reimbursement for year 22 contract. So we're still, we still got some work to get done there. Oak Wilt, nothing new to report. Mountain bike trails, nothing. Burpee, nothing. ATV snowmobile trails, I didn't include it in the report, but we're currently working on our grant applications for spring. Our deadline is April 15th. I've been several meetings with the Alliance, working with projects and grants that we're going to apply for this spring. We've got a pretty good list of wants and needs for projects that we're starting to finish up right now. That being said, Brian, I do have to get in touch with you for a couple of requests that we have on some of the trails out your way. So
Okay,
all for me at some point soon here.
okay.
Other than that, I don't have anything else to report this time.
Okay. I had a question. Go ahead. Hey, Greg, I've always been curious on the sales list here. So you've got one in 5319. Bid value was 77,000. You've received 18,000, so it's 58,000 plus left. Do they have a timeline to pay this?
Yeah, the way this shows is what happens is so for that instance, we'll have a contract that'll move into, what do we have, 2 sales listed. So they'll move into a sale. They won't complete the sale. They'll move out. You know, they work the market. So they cut a certain amount and that's what they pay. So we have, 50, 60%, for example, of a sale left to cut. Typically we have a 2-year window for them to cut. That's what our contract basic language is. They have 2 year without an increase. We will go to a maximum of 4 years on a contract.
Then you got one here, 11/3/17, bid value 78,000.
Yeah, but we did grant an extra year with the COVID and the Verso deal. So we have contracts now that will go 5 years. So we did that policy for a year where they had an extra year without an increase to deal with those hardships with COVID and the markets.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I got a quick question, and I apologize, I should probably know the answer to this, but regarding the road bans or weight restrictions, who actually imposes those? Is that from the county or is that each individual township?
County, both.
Well, both, yeah.
So it's the county on county roads and the townships on town roads, is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the towns usually follow the county. When the county goes on, then the townships usually put theirs on at the same time.
And the highway department determines this?
Yeah,
County highway.
the commissioner, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good question for you, Mike, on the good neighbor revenue, we're on a cash basis for that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, how is that working, the good neighbor?
It's been going pretty well. It's a little extra boost for the foresters to work. The state's really appreciative of the work that we can get done for them. We've had our growing pains dealing with 2 other entities, starting from the federal level to the state and down to us, but it seems to be working very well. A lot of positive reception for this program.
Good, okay. Any other questions for Greg? All right, Greg, you need an authorization to get your annual money?
Yep, this is our resolution to apply for outdoor recreational trail aids, the ATV motorized grants, or snowmobile also, which I referred to in the report.
Okay, so.
I'll make, Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the resolution as written.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Okay, motion and has been made and seconded to approve the authorizing resolution. Any more discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carried. All right, I think we're down to the buffer cutting. This probably is for Sealy Trails. Greg, before you talk, I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, the county is assigned Greg 2 high priorities that affect all of the taxpayers in Sardis County. One is to make sure we get the stumpage revenue that we budgeted. Last year, that meant about $2 million. Greg and his crew did a great job exceeding the budget. And also, we've asked Greg to go heads down to try to finalize the carbon credit process. And when we do, Greg, I think it'll be over $1 million of revenue for the county, something like that. So, I mean, those are the highest priorities we've given, Greg. Sealy Trails, it's a high priority, but it's not the highest priority at this point. So Greg, if you want to give us an update where you stand.
Yeah, I guess with the direction from the committee from November, and like you said, it's been a really busy winter and we haven't got to some of these issues, but I did have a good meeting yesterday morning with a representative from the trail group. We sat and talked for a couple hours. We went over a lot of the issues, a lot of the concerns, and we talked about what our role is, what our goals and objectives are. So it's a good starting point. Where we're looking at going from here is trying to have the Sealy Trail System develop a formal management plan looking forward, and we can get our management plan in sync with theirs. So we had a lot of loose ends with this trail system over the years. So we've got a little bit of work to do on both sides of it to come to an understanding of both of our wants and needs for management in that area. So that's where we sit today. I'm sure we'll have further discussions going forward.
So, and this is probably an unfair question, but I'll ask it anyway. When do you think you'll bring back to this committee a recommendation or a conclusion to the citizens' concerns?
Well, I mean, we can probably come up with something over the next couple of months. So, I mean, you know, my recommendation, I explained in November. I'm not going to go through all that again. I mean, we kind of went through the process, why we do what we do and how we do it and all the factors that lead into it. So we've got some work to do. The trail group has some work to do.
Okay, so if we put it on the agenda for May.
Yep, we'll have some info.
Okay. All right, and do we have any members of the public who want to make comments? Please, say your name and where your address, please.
Okay, my name is Barb O'Brien, and I live and own property on Old Double O Road in Sealy. And I've spoken with this committee previously about implementing a buffer on the Sealy trails when logging. At the February meeting, I submitted a petition with 153 signatures supporting a buffer. Today, I'm submitting an additional 141 signatures for you supporting a buffer.
Thank you.
Here's the originals. So far we've got just shy of 300 people who are in support of a buffer on those Sealy trails. And most of those signatures are from the warming house. I just left the petition sit there. So these are people who are using those trails. I've done some additional research on the DNR site, looking at timber sale contracts. I found examples of timber sales that included buffers and trails in other counties. And I was actually quite impressed with the detail and parameters that the logging companies can adhere to. And so because I'm not quite sure which policy comprehensive plan we're under right now, if it's the old one or the new one that's under the draft. So from the old policy or the current policy, the purpose of aesthetic management is to minimize negative aesthetic impacts of timber harvesting. The goal of the Forestry Committee is to protect or to enhance the value of the unique natural resources within reason. That's a direct quote from the comprehensive plan. From the new version of the comprehensive plan, which is still under draft according to the website, aesthetic management, the purpose of aesthetic management is to minimize negative aesthetic impacts of timber harvesting or other forest development projects. The goal of the county will be to protect or to enhance the aesthetic value of these unique resources within reason. And also from that new version, the primary goal of management will be either scenic values for the conservation of a unique resource or the betterment of the facility or recreational trail itself. For recreational facilities placed in Zone A classification, timber will be managed to afford the greatest scenic potential for public enjoyment, but not to the detriment of the facility itself or the public safety. It's this committee's job to follow and implement the county's comprehensive 15-year plan. The plans are clear on aesthetic management. The Sealy Trails are used by so many people in so many different ways. They meet the criteria outlined in the plan. There has to be a compromise that maintains the integrity of the aesthetic beauty of these beautiful trails. Please put the Sealy Trails in Zone A, which would include a buffer. And at the very least, please, at this time, put any additional logging and logging contracts for the Sealy Trails on hold until this issue is resolved. Let's support the silent sport community, the tourism industry, and the logging industry. The county benefits from all three. Thank you for your time and your service to local government.
Thank you. Greg, how many logging activities do we have with that effect if we were to put them on hold? Yes.
In this area, we have one contract. And putting a contract on hold is not a possibility.
Any more?
Yes,
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I chaired it last month and this was brought up at that time, and then she presented some more signatures, which I give to the clerk. But I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, so I had Greg and you take a look at this about getting it on the agenda. I just didn't want to make that decision without you looking at it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Anybody else in the audience that wants to speak? And state your name and address, please.
Good morning. I'm Susan Bauer, and my address is 13200 North US Highway 63. And I am speaking again on the Sealy Hills issue. I've lived in Lenwood Township for 17 years. We recently bought property that is next to the Sealy Hills trails. And my concern is, as a landowner right next to the trails, where we made a significant investment in a home there, that we use the trails daily. My husband is an Olympic skier, John Bauer. He uses the trails daily. Our kids use the trails daily. And we made this investment in this home to use these trails. And we are just expressing our frustration that we did not know about the logging coming up, and that we would encourage there to be more open communication as to potential buyers to property, as to what's happening to areas that are being advertised as being close to a trail system. And then if the trail system is not going to be a very aesthetic option in the near future because of logging. So that's where I'm coming from in support of minimizing the logging at this point on the Sealy Hills trails. And I just want to say also that other properties are lots are being sold next to the property or with a trail that has access to the Sealy Hills trails. And those are being advertised as having access to the Sealy Hills trails. And it would just be a buyer beware situation if somebody buys the property and doesn't go out there and sees that some of it's been clear cut and that there's potential for more of it to be logged. And then one more issue is that the grooming on a clear cut section of trail, my husband helps with the grooming, is very dangerous. You can bog a snowmobile real easily. These are smaller trails, so they're groomed with snowmobiles, and it just becomes more dangerous when it's a windblown trail system and snowmobile tips, and you get broken machinery. It takes a lot of energy to get the snowmobile back on the trail. And then also parts of the trails have been, washed out because of no plants or anything holding the soil in place, erosion. So those are my main concerns about logging at Sealy Hills. And I was the one who was hearing all of these reports and from different people talking to the citizens who use the trails. And so I brought together a committee, an ad hoc committee to address this situation. And Greg alluded to having a communication with Eric North. And so we're hoping that we can work together, that this ad hoc committee can work together with the county on this issue. It's just a matter of communication that when I don't have any background in forestry or anything, and somebody who does have a background in forestry can segue into a committee like this more easily. I just hope that we can form a way to have better communication between the regular public and people with forestry backgrounds to work together.
Any more questions, any more comments from the audience? Thank you.
Hi, I live at 11900 Sheller Road. My name is Chaplain Letitia, and I live on 11900 Sheller Road. I'm a ceiling lion. I also reuse the trails, so we're, basically in the area all the time. My background consists of working with the National Park System on a national trail. So I've done a lot of building on national trails, also trails in the area. A lot of it has to do with training and trying to keep trail systems, root systems of trees, things that can be removed, and trying to make it so it's easier for people to use. It could be like hikers, bikers, it can be even snowmobilers. It can be taking away too much of the trees can actually cause more problems. So I have about 25 years of helping with and it's called the Ice Age Trail. So a lot of my friends are in Forestry Department, DNR, also National Park Systems. That's kind of background. So moving forward, what my biggest thing also is the fact that I'm a healthcare provider. Taking away some of the aesthetics really doesn't really help a lot of people when they're trying to hike on the trail, and to work together, not to take so much of the trail and leaving some aesthetics. It adds to the health and wellness of everybody. The people that live in Sealy Hills and also come from Hayward and all the surrounding area, they're professionals or medical people that already live there. They're teachers. I see teachers biking. They're taking care of everybody. And if we can just leave something for them, let's work together on this. And I really like the fact that Greg brought up a formal management plan. I would love to be on the committee working together with something that we could even have a trail community. It's called a trail community for everybody. Also taking away from snowmobilers too much stuff. The snow melts their trails too fast, and I think that it's just a win all for everybody, for the health of everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public would like to speak on this agenda topic?
Yes. Pat O'Brien. Old Low Hayward. I wasn't going to speak. My wife has said about as much as can be said on the subject for now, but I had a couple of thoughts, and I just encourage you people to go through and look at those petitions and see where those people have come from. There's names from Arizona to Maine and everybody in between using our little piece of Sawyer County that they just love and attracting people, and it's not costing the county a dime other than a few sticks of pulpwood. And just to leave a buffer up there and not just destroy the whole place. So later today, the group was going to go up and start clearing trails because of all the storm damage. And I'm saying to myself, well, why in the hell are we going to go up and do this if they're just going to lay waste to it and make a mess again? And I also was thinking, in this time of divisiveness, that you got the county board, town of Len Root, City Lions Club, this new committee that's been formed that I went to the meeting on. They can work together to do something like this and just bring people together. And it shouldn't take that much, just leave a little bit up there. So it's just 25 years of work where all these people, all these hundreds and hundreds of man hours don't go to waste. So I thank you for your time, and Let's see if we can get something that satisfies everybody.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I'm reading this correctly, this was just brought up at the February meeting, this issue, correct? No?
November.
November.
meeting.
October.
Thank you.
All right, any other member of the public that wants to talk on the subject? Finished going through my public comment forms. Okay. Anything else any member of the committee want to talk about this? Or should we move on? What would you like?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm a steward of the land here. Now, when the county puts a sale out for timber, do you have to do a land management program on it, like we do as a farmer?
Say that again.
Like being a farmer,
Mhm.
all my land has a plan.
Mhm.
It tells me if I'm highly erodible, wetlands, or
Mhm.
whatever. Do you guys do that for the sales too?
Very similar, very similar. You know, it's, we have our big plan, the 15-year plan, we have our annual work plan, and then we have each individual timber sale that we write a prescription for. You know, we look at soils, we look at NHI, natural heritage inventory. It's a process, you know, there's nothing random about our prescriptions or where we harvest or when.
But my question is though, the comment was that some of these are being clear cut in the erosion. Well,
Yeah.
if we have something highly erodible, we can't farm it. Like, you know, we can't clear cut it or whatever like that then.
These stands are probably more erodible when they're forested without an understory underneath it. For an aspen stand, I mean, you go look at an aspen stand the first or second year that it's harvested, and it is a mat of aspen
Right.
regeneration. You know, this stand, you know, it's a second cut aspen stand, so it's very homogeneous. There's not much of an understory. You know, in fact, I mean, that's where this stand of timber came from. This is the aesthetics that this group is desiring was developed from a clear cut. You know, and at this point, we're just trying to mimic a natural disturbance and to regenerate this stand. So future trail users can have the opportunity to experience the same timber type. We've got 600 acres of 40 to 43-year-old aspen in this block that we have to manage somehow, or we are going to lose the site. You know, aspen that falls apart, it is, I mean, aesthetics are, it's a subjective thing, but I don't know many people that likes to look at mature and over mature aspen stand that falls apart. It turns to brush, it's impassable. It's a long process for natural succession to come back with a different timber type. You know, so that's where we're at. And so that's where it's kind of frustrating on our end. It's like we have a long-term view, very long-term view for forestry. This is what we do. We have a lot of demands on the forest. We have, I mean, every week there's a new demand. We have a lot of user groups and we're trying to balance it all out. And I would like the luxury to have a very narrow, single-minded view of this aesthetics looks good to me, but as foresters, we don't have that opportunity. We've got a very big picture, a very long-term management goal for people today and for people tomorrow. So long answer to a short question.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
Yes,
Greg, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, listening to these people on the Sealing Trail, as myself, I agree with these people and that we should get something up here as soon as we can to see what we can do to help these people out. That's just a comment.
All right. Yep. Crack at it. Okay. Any more questions or comments on the Sealy Trails buffer question? Thank you, everybody, for coming. Roy, are you up?
Yeah. Wildlife, tentatively on April 2nd, we have a Sawyer County CDAC has been granted approval to hold a field tour to discuss deer and deer habitat issues. This could be subject to change according to DNR protocols, but when it happens, there'll be a public notice published in the local paper. And there's similar meetings that are tentatively planned to be held in other counties. The gray wolf, as you probably know, was put back on the endangered species list. The DNR plans to refund the $10 application fee for those who had applied for a wolf harvest permit and to restore preference points to all hunters and trappers to their fall 2021 pre-application status. The court ruling also cancels all permits to landowners with wolf conflicts, which allow lethal removal of wolves. The DNR will not authorize the use of lethal control in a depredation case, nor will hunters be allowed to train dogs or track wolves with dogs. Forestry, we performed approximately 300 acres of reconnaissance, and I've been preparing environmental reviews for cutting notices to be submitted for the upcoming timber sale bid opening. That's all I have.
All right, any questions?
Yeah. All right. On these wolves on depredation cases, so if a farmer's got 2-3 cattle that's been sprayed on by a wolf, there's nothing that that farmer can do about that?
I have to get back to you on that.
That way to read it here, that's what
Yeah.
it sounds like. They just have to put
Yeah.
up with it.
Exactly, that's the way I read it.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments for Brian?
Yeah, I have another question regarding the wolves. It says the lower 48, yet how do Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana still maintain their wolf season and we can't? Do you have an answer for that?
No, that I was unaware of. I'd have to get back with you on that too.
Okay. Would you please, to the
Yeah.
next meeting? Jesse, is that okay if he gets back at the next meeting?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And as far as the other question that Mr. Buchholz had regarding the wolves, it looks like there's no way to protect your own livestock at this point, from what I've read and what I understand. I mean, I don't even know if you're allowed to protect your own children from a wolf attack at this point.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the DNR report? All right, so the next item of business of the carbon credits update. Greg, you want to give us an overview of how we're going to do this?
Yeah. As I've reported previous months, we're working through our carbon project assessment. Today I have Josh Strauss online. He's the Executive Vice President for Blue Source that I've been working with through this process. Josh has a PowerPoint that he would like to share with the committee to go over some of the general ideas for this project. There's a portion of this that we can do in open session. But then there's some details that are in here that we would be required to go into closed session.
Okay, and you'll flag us when we should go into closed session?
Yeah, I think Josh will let us know if we get to that point, so.
And the goal of this presentation, I'm assuming, is for this committee to authorize you to proceed and maybe hire an operation with Mr. Keith, hire an attorney to go over contracts and things like that.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So I guess I can hand it over to Josh at this point.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks everybody for allowing me to take some time to speak with you all this morning. Greg and I have been talking about this now. I mean, time flies, but he really started his investigation of this project all the way back last summer. So there's been a lot of thought that's gone into things up to this point. And my team has done a whole lot of analysis to try and figure out just exactly what kind of carbon opportunity there is on Sawyer Forest. And the short answer is there's a pretty interesting one. But without any more buildup, I'll just cut to the deck. And then when we get through here, I'll be happy to answer any questions that folks have. So if you don't mind, can I share the screen?
Sure. I can do
Perfect. Perfect.
that. You don't need to do it yourself. Okay.
Yeah, I think are you guys seeing it?
Yeah, yes.
Very good. Okay. So just to kick things off, I want to go through about what I'll be talking about today. Basically, I'll talk about my company, Blue Source, a little bit to give you a little background as to who we are and our experience. Then I'll discuss sort of the project development process, what it takes to develop a forest carbon project. also what the kind of commitments are, the amount of time, et cetera. And then finally, which is really, I think, going to be most exciting for this committee here, we'll talk about what the actual implications are in terms of expected credit generation and revenue for the county itself. And then we can jump right into questions. So starting off, who's Blue Source? So we're very proud that at this point our organization is definitely the longest established player in this space in North America. We've almost at our 21st anniversary right now. In that time, we've really been a pioneer in a lot of different carbon credit activities. We have participated in 20 different varieties of carbon credit projects, but bread and butter for our company since the earliest days has really been forestry. At this point, we have over 85 forest carbon projects in the US alone, and that covers over 3.25 million acres. We do everything in-house. So our development team has our own financing folks, our own credit marketing folks, our own legal experts, and then most importantly, 20 professional foresters with at least a master's in forestry that do all the calculations, all the groundwork, all the remote sensing, all the carbon, et cetera. One thing that we're also very proud of is that unlike pretty much anyone else in the space, we've worked with a really wide variety of landowners. So we're talking about nonprofits like TNC and Audubon, to many public agencies like the Michigan DNR and several counties within Wisconsin, which I'll talk about a little bit later, to some of the bigger TMOs like the Forest Land Group or Campbell Global, et cetera. And we also do some work with tribal organizations. This map here shows sort of the distribution of where our projects are across the country, just to give you a feel. You can see by the color coding, there's a whole bunch of different varieties of landowner types. And importantly, though, you see there's some real clustering in most of the really heavily wooded areas of the country. And in this next slide, I'm going to zoom in more to talk about what's probably most relevant for this discussion is really in Wisconsin and then in northern Michigan, where we're by far the largest player. We have over 80% of the projects that have been developed in this region. And crucially, in Wisconsin, you can see that we're working with a number of the other well-forested counties on projects that we expect to be really successful and exciting. That started with Bayfield, but now we're also working with Iron, Washburn, Rusk, and Price County as well, and several others that we're talking to. So we'd love to bring Sawyer into the fold in that context, and we think this project really looks nice compared to some of those. This is a little bit of a in the weeds slide, but there's different methods for actually calculating the carbon. There's different protocols that can be used. The one that is considered kind of the top flight protocol these days outside of the state of California is the American Carbon Registry, or ACR's Improved Forest Management Protocol. And Blue Source is really the leader in that protocol, having developed over 60% of any of the projects ever done using it, and also generating over 60% of the credits that have ever come from projects. So really, it is our bailiwick. And as I mentioned before, we work with all sorts of landowners, but public is really it's really a bright spot for us. We are the only developer in this space that has extensive experience working with public entities. Actually, I think the only one other developer that has done a public project was just with a city in Oregon, so a relatively small scale project. But Blue Source has experience working with 3 different water authorities in Pennsylvania, where we have 2 projects right now with the Michigan DNR, which are looking like they're going to be excellent and about collectively occupy about 250,000 acres. We work with 3 cities in Massachusetts, and as I mentioned, 5 counties in Wisconsin, amongst a few others. So that gives us a lot of experience with going through the contracting process that can be quite different, and we have the patience to work through that and find solutions for public entities, but then also really designing the project. The mechanics of a public project versus a TMO project or a private landowner project are quite different in terms of the calculations, and we've honed our skills with that over the last decade. So now enough about Blue Source. Those are our bona fides. Now I just want to talk about what is project development. What are we actually going to do when you develop a carbon project? And I think it's easiest to break it down into sort of 7 steps. The first step is a project feasibility analysis. We've already completed this. This is what we've been working on for several months and have had lots of discussions like with Greg, with your team, to really understand what's happening at the forest level, as well as utilizing a bunch of remote data and data we collected ourselves. What this feasibility analysis really is we take that data, we pull it into our models, and we calculate how much carbon we think can actually be generated from the project area over the project life, which in this case, I'll talk a little more about it, but the project life is 40 years. So you have 40 years to generate carbon and carbon revenue. We ran this analysis, and then once we get to that point where we think there is a viable project, which we do, then we would move into contracting and listing. And then immediately after listing, we actively are generating the credits, actively moving forward with the project. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, we're going to generate a bespoke carbon inventory just for this property. So my team of foresters will go and we'll design an inventory. It'll have something around 250 to 350 plots spaced across a grid. It's going to be fixed radius plots, and it's going to be very similar to sort of an academic level of detail on the plot collection, because though there may be plenty of inventory data available to really understand carbon and to pass the third-party verification, which is later on, you really need to have plots that are specifically for this purpose. We're going to be measuring trees to the 1/10 of an inch in diameter, to the nearest foot in height. We're going to be looking at standing dead trees, analyzing what the carbon defect is in those trees. We're going to be taking a plot to make sure that we understand the kind of sapling regeneration, taking cores. So, I wouldn't normally go into that detail, but knowing this is a forestry committee, I figured we'll give you a little bit clearer view. But needless to say, we got to get a very clear picture on just how much carbon's out there in the forest. So we execute that inventory. Then we move into our modeling and documentation process, which my team will use some of our proprietary models in exactly the order that's prescribed by the protocol itself in order to quantify the amount of carbon represented on the forest. We do that documentation. Then we move into the verification process, where we have a third-party accredited body that will go and objectively review our work to make sure it's done accurately, and also undergo a field audit where they go to a random sample of the plots that we had measured to confirm that the actual carbon on the ground is consistent with what we're showing in our documentation. Once they get done with that, there's a series of back and forth questions where they'll ask us to explain, why we chose to do this, why this was calculated in this way. We answer those questions, and then the project will move on to the carbon registry. That's the American Carbon Registry that I mentioned earlier, or ACR. That's the official body that serializes the units and allows the carbon credits to be traded, sold, and retired. I want to highlight that the registry itself is a nonprofit body with the sole purpose of trying to help address climate change. So this isn't a company that's trying to reap a bunch of benefits from generating credits and realizing revenue from it. Their whole purpose is to develop the clearest methods in order to quantify carbon, and then also to efficiently create a marketplace where those credits can be sold. So the registry itself will audit the work that the verifier did, audit the work that Blue Source did, and when they are happy, then they will issue the credits, and then Blue Source will be able to sell them at that point to our network of buyers. So it really is a turnkey process where we're going to go from this very initial analysis, which we did totally for free, all the way to the actual sale of the credits. And one thing I want to highlight, you see this downward arrow on the left side that talks about credit marketing. Well, basically, from the moment that we've contracted the project, we'll start looking into our network of buyers to see who might be the right fit for this project, because not every project is going to be the best for each buyer, right? Certain buyers may say, look, I really like projects with a strong recreational component where there's people who are utilizing the trails, for example, as was talked about earlier today, on the forest. I really want a project that has certain habitat benefit for certain types of species. So we're going to work with your team to suss out what the sort of key kind of charismatic features are of the forest and market that in addition to the total amount of carbon that's going to be quantified. That process will do in tandem with all the development. So generally, when the credits are issued, we will have a buyer ready to take credit offtake for that first year's generation right away. Now you're probably asking, what's that kind of timing for this? And so this chart here, don't worry about looking at the very detailed breakdown. What I want to show here is that it's about an 18-month process from when we list the project to when the first credits are issued and can be sold. About 1 year of that process is what they call the reporting period. That's the amount of time over which carbon starts to accrue, or the carbon calculations allow carbon to accrue. And during that period, we're going to do the inventory, we're going to do all the documentation, we're going to do all the modeling, we're going to prepare a bunch of marketing materials, we're going to be talking to buyers in the marketplace. And then at the exact end of that first year, at the 1 year anniversary of commencement, verification begins. And so in that next 6 months, we'll get the verification done, we'll get the registration done with that audit from the registry, and we'll sell those credits. So that's generally the target, 18 months. We have been able to do it faster in the past, but I always prefer to, I prefer to underpromise and overdeliver with pretty much all aspects of this. So that gives you an idea of sort of the flow and timing. Want to talk a little bit about what my team does in terms of detail and some of the things that we really have developed over the years. For 10 years of our 20 years, we've been developing our own forest modeling tools that really fit in with these carbon protocols. Our staff of foresters has more experience with carbon forestry than anyone else in the business. And what creates a lot of value in addition to just those people are the tools that we've developed by programming them in-house. It allows for very quick iteration and modeling of changing how different treatments might affect the forest to see how that will play out in terms of carbon. And then also we have great remote sensing capabilities, meaning any kind of LiDAR we can get our hands on, we can add that into our understanding of the forest carbon. We use radar. We also use multispectral imagery. So needless to say, like whatever data is available, we pull it in, and that contributes to our project. And this is just a slide that shows, I talked about buyers out there. The buyers out there are, myriad at this point. I mean, it's pretty much, just as a casual observer of this space, you'd probably notice every other week or so a Fortune 500 company saying, I'm now going to make this carbon commitment. We sell to pretty much all of the big interested name brand buyers. And that's a big advantage because we have these longstanding relationships with them. They trust the Blue Source product. They come to us directly looking for credits, and it can lead to capturing of premium pricing and actually much more efficient sale of credits. So, I've talked a lot about how is the project developed, what is Blue Source going to do, but what does the project actually mean for the county? What are you committing to? And so that's what this slide is meant to show. As I mentioned before, it's a 40-year project life. And the golden rule, the key commitment is that you're gonna, from the point of commitment on, you're gonna not harvest more than you're actually growing on the property, right? Now that's consistent with forest management according to your management plan right now. So that's not gonna be a huge hurdle, but it's something that's important to understand because previously, before enrolling in this project, if you so chose, you could decide to really heavily focus on timber and remove substantial amounts of your carbon stocks. If you move forward in this vein, the idea is that into the future, you're going to at least maintain the current level of stocking and hopefully improve stocking. And as stocking goes up, then you would be able to generate more and more credits. Now, on the ground maintenance, you need to maintain certification. Now, fortunately, the forest is already certified, so that's not an issue for you guys. Then there's also the reporting and verification components. So there's a detailed carbon inventory that I mentioned to you earlier. That's conducted by Blue Source at the beginning of the project and then needs to be updated every decade. So for those 4 decades, you need to do an update once every 10 years. And that's consistent with any kind of good forestry. You need to know what's out there in the woods. So you have to go back to each of the original plot locations, remeasure trees, and confirm that the models are accurately reflecting what's happening on the ground. So 10 years, you have to do the update. Annually, there's some basic forms that you fill out saying, here's the amount of harvesting that went on annually, here's the amount of anticipated growth. And then verification wise, every 5 years, you have to have an audit where someone's going to check your documentation and check the actual on-site growth to confirm that all the reported amounts of carbon are consistent with what's out there in reality. I will note that though there is a 5-year requirement for verification, in between those intensive site audits, you can have what is called a desk verification, where the verifier will simply look at the documentation and give it its stamp of approval. And that's actually necessary for any credit issuance event. So you don't have to verify except every 5 years, but in order to get credits, you do need to have some level of verification in any given year. So when Blue Source is actually working on a project, what will happen is that we're going to actually execute verifications on an annual basis. We'll do 4 verifications of that light touch desk verification in a row, and then move into the requisite site verification when necessary. So with that, I really want to get to the meat of the carbon revenue projections and just how the project performs. I'm fine to do this in open forum, just so folks who are tuning in can see the capability, and then I'll take some questions, and then if there's any questions that the committee wants to ask in a closed forum, then we can move into that. But happy to just make sure that those who are interested can see just how meaningful this can be for the county. So this is kind of the key outlook. The proposal for working with Blue Source is an initial 10-year proposal. The reason we do a decade, even though it's a 40-year commitment, is simply because that's what our clients have generally preferred. The idea that Blue Source, you're going to get the project up and running, do the heavy lifting, get the inventory established. And then if the county feels capable of leading this process after the first decade, by all means, you can take it on. If not, you can continue with Blue Source, and we've worked with landowners in both different ways. So in the initial 10 years, here's our projections. We're thinking very likely this will produce something around 1.2 million credits over that 10-year period. And this is taking into account an expected harvest of about 50% of annual growth. I think actually, correction, 71% of annual growth. That's based on historic harvesting. So, this notes that this is totally in conformance with the allowing folks to use the trails, snowmobiles, any kind of recreational use. There's no restrictions at all. And so let me talk about some of these other columns here. Average price, we're projecting starting at a $12 price per ton and going up about $8 per year. I'd say that's conservative given that we're currently selling credits for $14 or more. So I'm starting off with a bit of a discount and then having a modest increase in price. As I mentioned before, I'd rather under-promise and over-deliver here. If you're comfortable with these financial numbers, I think you're certainly going to be comfortable with the numbers that we're able to come up with. The expense column is covered by Blue Source. This is part of our service. The county will never write a check to Blue Source. Blue Source covers all the third-party expenses, meaning paying that verifier, paying for credit registration, etc. And we're only reimbursed upon successful sale of credits. So we have all the skin in the game. And if something were to go wrong, which thankfully in our 85 project history, we haven't had a situation like this, but we want to show our clients that we know what we're doing and we're going to take all the financial risk. If something were to go wrong, county can walk, Blue Source eats the loss, and no harm, no foul. But what we fully expect is that we're going to execute this. Blue Source will be reimbursed for the expenses that we spent out of the first tranche of revenues, and then the revenue will be split on a 75%, 25% basis. And in this column on the far right, you see the end of the day take home for the county. So this is after Blue Source's expense, after everything. End of the day, we're expecting about $13.75 million over 10 years for the county. And then, that's only in the first decade. So as you see from my box at the bottom, for that next 30 years, the county's still expected to generate about 1.8 million more tons if they continue to verify on, on that regular basis. So there's substantial more revenue to come. I'm just showing the explicit amount expected during Blue Source's tenure with the project. Last piece here at the bottom is a monitoring endowment. This is not required by the program. This is not required by Blue Source. All this is saying that if you wanted to think about the costs of maintaining that inventory and doing those 5-year verifications during the 30-year period after Blue Source's involvement, well, if you were to set aside this $325,000 in year one and put it in some modest investment vehicle that would have something like a 4% rate of return, that would be sufficient to cover your cost needs over the rest of the project life, because Blue Source is covering it for that full next 10 years. And that monitoring endowment, if you chose to put it in place, would safely cover, future generations of managers and of the forestry committee's needs for maintenance. So I know that's, I've been moving kind of quickly here, but that my goal is to get a lot of information out and then allow folks to ask some questions. I'll just highlight again that I think that about 1.2 million tons over 10 years with nearly $14 million in revenue. This is a very solid project. I'd probably put it in, if we were talking baseball here, we'd be a triple, and then we'll see how things go with actual development, maybe end up being a home run. So with that, I'll move to questions.
Anybody, any questions? Greg, you have any comments? You probably asked. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. What about kind of loss of forest due to natural events, tornadoes, wildfires?
Yep.
And is that accounted for as part of this project?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's absolutely essential to the integrity of the program. The numbers that you see here in terms of credit generation have already been adjusted to remove insurance tons, something that we call the buffer. So 18% of all the credits that are generated by a project are actually directly shunted into a buffer pool, which is basically insurance against natural disasters like that, right? So if you have a significant wind event, if you have a massive fire event, et cetera, you're protected, right? So this is just like you may have homeowners insurance or car insurance or any collective insurance method. There's a big pool that's there that the registry maintains. And in any one year, you may have someone who has an event and they're covered, but there's certainly enough in the pool to protect everybody involved. So just to put a dot on to emphasize, this means that you're not going to owe, right? Like if you had a significant event that led to loss of forest and you'd already been selling those credits, you're not going to have to go replace a substantial amount of those credits by something you did that you couldn't control. The insurance covers you.
Right, that's your question. All right. Any other questions? Anybody have any questions?
I have a question first.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Okay, this almost sounds like a program, kind of like tax credits for housing. That's what it almost, I see a lot of parallels there. So the question I have is, and you kind of inadvertently answered it, I think, but what happens if the harvesting exceeds the growth? Are you out of compliance with?
Yeah, so
we call them buyers, but they're more or less investors. And so what happens when if we were to become out of compliance?
Yeah, so that is the key thing, is that we don't want the harvesting to exceed the growth. Now, I will say that in such a situation, right, what you need to do is basically replace credits to the system which have been claimed, right? So the idea is, I'm going to use some just rough numbers here, right? Let's say that you started with a base of 100,000 tons of carbon, and then you put on 10 the next year, and then you sold all those credits, And then the year after that, you actually harvested to the point that you had dropped your total stocking on the forest to 105,000 tons. Well, you're 5,000 tons in debt to the program, which means you've got to go into the market, buy 5,000 tons of carbon and give it back to the American Carbon Registry so that you don't have a debt anymore. That is something that we really would like to avoid. So clearly there's a method to fix the problem, but you should come into this with the understanding and intention that you're not going to be harvesting at such a dramatic level, because the goal is to be taking advantage of carbon revenues and generating carbon benefit to the climate.
Okay, and then when you're looking for buyers, I mean, is that a competitive thing where you're reaching out and then they're all competing to
Absolutely.
buy these credits? Okay.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things we really pride ourselves on. We're going to submit this project to a bunch of different RFPs. So there's buyers who are going to have a bunch of asking for proposals. We'll put it in a ton of proposals, and we'll have individual discussions with buyers about this particular project is going to be a good fit for you because of where your location is, because of your specific needs for erosion control, water quality, all these other things that they may find appealing, and we'll use those to compete against each other to find the best price.
Because yeah, well, that's good to know. And then, so the list of all the companies that buy these, that was going to be one of my questions. Well, how many buyers are even out there nationally I mean, is it really just one or two companies? But it looks like you have a whole lot of them there.
It's actually a really extensive list now. Virtually the entirety of the Fortune 500 buys some quantity of credit at this point.
Well, that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah, no problem.
Other questions for Seth?
I have one question.
Go ahead.
So who goes in and makes sure that plot ain't gonna be over harvested? Do Blue Source do that, or do they have a company that looks at that?
So we're going to do the carbon tracking, in conjunction with the forestry staff to make sure that we know what's happening on the ground. But in terms of like monitoring the harvest itself, the idea is that you're going to go and you're going to still have your harvest contractors contract or move material, but they're going to have explicit volumes that they're allowed to remove or explicit acreage that they're allowed to, however you want to portion it out. And that's just going to need to be maintained such that there's expectations that they're not going to remove more than has been, allotted. And, we're not asking, you definitely never want someone to avoid a carbon plot, because that would basically make the inventory itself non-representative, because those plots are supposed to represent what's happening across the landscape. So you don't actually have to, you don't even want to have people avoid plots. So you just have people harvest as usual. They just have to be, they have to be consistent with their contract for what they can remove.
Any more questions? I have a question for Greg. Greg, now you know the ins and outs of this much more than we do. Is it going to cost us anything, or is there going to be a negative impact to any of our revenue or your time?
I think that the only negative would be there's going to be there's going to be some time put into this, for the verifications throughout the 10 years and after. But I mean, given the benefit that we're looking at, that's a pretty minimal investment on our part to work this project through. I guess I just wanted to kind of answer there's concern about harvest levels and everything. We have our allowable cut, that we figure every year. It's factored into our 15-year plan. It's factored into our annual work plan. We're based on acreage. Just given the constraints of our markets, manpower, and everything like that, I mean, we don't come close to exceeding our allowable harvest on an annual basis. We have forest certification we have to answer to. So all that's taken care of, regardless if we're in this carbon project or not. We're pretty regulated on our acreages of what we can harvest annually. So there's really not a risk of us over harvesting or anything like that. So this just kind of gels in with what our plans already are adhering to.
Okay. So the DNR monitors what we do, right?
To some extent, yeah.
I mean, they approve our annual plan, don't they?
Yep.
Right, and you've got, we're sustainable for us, so we have the nonprofit that monitors that. isn't
Yeah,
it?
we're dual certified, SFI and FSC. So, I mean, we have to adhere to that on a lot of different places, a lot of different levels. So it's just our plan of work each year is based upon the acres that we can harvest within our allowable cut.
Okay. Any more questions for Seth?
Josh.
Josh, sorry. All right.
Bruce, I do have one last question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, 40 years is, it's not that long, but it is long. So my question would be, let's hypothetically say that there's some program or forest-related program that's offered, say, 15 years down the road, and the county wishes to withdraw. Now, what's the penalty for early withdrawal?
Yep, fair question. And the program, it's now, as far as penalties go, there's no extra penalty, but every credit that you've generated, you have to replace, right? So everything that you've claimed in terms of carbon, you got to give back. So you have to go find that in the market and replace that to the registry. There are some other examples of programs where you have to pay everything you've done plus a penalty percentage. That isn't the case in this program. It's 1 for 1. So every credit you've generated, you've got to replace. Now, presumably, if the project is performing very well and you're seeing, great value for these credits, there's going to be no motivation to do that. But there is that is the option.
Okay, so in other words, if we're into the program 15 years, all of a sudden there's another program that would benefit the county more. The county board at that time decides they want to opt out. We have to pay 15 years of credits back.
You just do the math on saying, well, how much better is this other program? How much is it going to cost me to replace all the credits? And then that's your answer.
Okay.
Now, I don't like people to think about this in terms of like an arbitrage play where it's like, all right, hopefully we'll be able to, get a bunch of credits now. And then if in the future we've solved climate change and the pricing goes way down, we can just buy our way out. But that the way the system works is that, if in truth, if all of a sudden we've figured things out and it's great for everyone and there's not a lot of value to carbon anymore, well, you can probably pretty cheaply go buy the credits equivalent to the ones that you've sold and get out of it without too much of a hassle. But, hopefully that's a problem we all have, right? Where all of a sudden we're out of the climate change woods.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I got it for Greg. What percentage of your acreage you monitor are you putting into this program? All of it, or?
Yeah, it's, well, at this point, yeah, we're looking at the full 115,000 acres.
So, no more questions. Do we need to go into closed session or?
I mean, I don't have specific questions or comments that would need that.
Okay. All right. Well, Josh, do you think we need to go in closed session? Is there anything more you want to tell us you haven't told us?
No, I think this is fine. I'm trying to be as as transparent as possible. I just didn't know, if there were any questions that were just for the group themselves. I was happy to take those too. But yeah, no, full speed ahead.
All right. So what's the pleasure of the committee? I don't have any need to go to full session, do we?
No, I don't. I have one more additional question for
Go ahead.
Josh. What happens after 40 years?
40 years, you're absolved of any further obligation. And if you want to enroll in a new project, you can do so. But that's the commitment.
All right. Anything else, gentlemen, please? Okay. All right. So I guess that we started this, so the goal would be the objective would be to authorize Greg to go ahead and continue working on it. I think one of the next steps is hire an attorney, isn't it, to look at the contract?
Yep. And, you know, and I have a draft contract that Josh provided me with previous that we can have a legal review of.
So what else, what are the other next steps? Next steps before we get our first check?
From my point of view, it's, you know, it's as soon as we can put a contract in place, then all those, that flow chart that I gave, then my team's off to the races. But, you know, we can't move until we have the carbon development and marketing contracts set.
Okay, so the next key step is the contract, that authorizes you to proceed, work with the attorneys to get the contract. You bring the contract back to this committee for approval, and then it'll probably go to the county board.
Yeah, ideally, I guess, the way I look at it is we would have the contract and the project reviewed by our legal counsel, and we would have the formal request for approval for next month for the committee and on the county board for the final say in April, and then off we go.
Races, as you said. Okay, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, that was as far as legal counsel that can be done with in-house.
Well, I mean, yeah, we'll
Our
find.
county rep, whatever.
Yeah, that we're not sure. We might have to, I've got some feelers out. There's attorneys that work specially with this for some of these other counties, so.
Just curious if we're gonna incur a cost there.
Oh, yeah, it'll probably be a review cost.
Do we have room for public comment at all or questions?
It's not on the agenda, but you guys have any problem?
No, you're the chair. If you're allowed, it's
Okay,
fine.
go ahead. if
I
it's
just
short.
wanted to ask Joshua, is it? So I was watching something on PBS and it talked about Europe and they actually make these carbon data things as well. So is my understanding that you remove the trees, but then you replace it with this like moss? Are you growing like moss and is that what it looks like afterwards? Or is that my?
No, this is a program that is not about harvesting trees to replace them with moss or any other kind. This is about actually quantifying the amount of carbon represented in your trees and the ongoing carbon from those trees as they grow, right? So it's about the forest as it stands, not about changing the forest to some other type of biomass.
So you have to leave some forest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the goal here is really to increase the biomass of the forest, not to reduce it at all. That's crucial.
Okay, thank you for answering.
Okay, thank you. So, we want a motion to authorize Greg to work with Keith. And Keith,
If you need one, I'd make that motion for him to
and then
move
proceed
forward.
and hire an attorney and do the next step. All right, is there a second to that? Okay, motion's been made and seconded to authorize Greg to move ahead. To hire, working with the interim administrator to hire an attorney. Any questions from your side?
Just a comment, you know, we do have the budget for legal expenses. We have been working with some outside firms. As Greg mentioned, there are attorneys that deal with this specifically, so we will hire the appropriate attorney.
Right.
And we use our legal expenses judiciously, despite what you read in the paper. We're not out of line with other counties' legal expenses. We did have some things in the past we had to clean up, obviously, but
Good. All right. So the motion's been made and there was a second, right? Yes. Okay. All right, any more discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Hey, thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure
Josh,
joining you
we'll be
this
in
morning,
touch. Yeah.
and really looking forward to continuing this process. Have a
you.
great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Any other questions or comments for the good of the cause? If not, we can, yes, Mr. Hawes.
just wanted to mention as well, this is my last land committee meeting, and I did want to work through this week just so that I could compliment the staff that I get to work with. These gentlemen, as you've heard today, have great expertise in their fields, and it's been a pleasure working with them and the board as well, and the rest of the staff. And so I've enjoyed my time here, and good luck in the future. These are exciting projects you have coming up.
Is this your last, or do you have one more?
It might be, I don't know, Mark, April, April is the new. This might be your last. Okay, probably could be, yeah, could be.
April, I think you could have April meetings, yeah.
You get one more, okay.
And I have a resolution to sign. So don't leave without that, board members.
What's that? Trying to get rid of people.
This is the outdoor recreation.
All right.
So.
Are we adjourned?
We are adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Bill.